Hello, and welcome to another episode of Glorious Life on Wheels. For those of you who follow along on my channel, you know that I have been researching and making preparations to apply for a permanent residency visa in Panama in order to move there, at least on a part-time basis. I've been doing research, contacting people that are expats there, collecting information and gathering documents to get them authenticated by the Panamanian consulate here in California. Well, all of those efforts and all of those dreams and plans may have effectively just been flushed right down the toilet. Why, you ask? Well, come on and join me, and I'm going to tell you why I say that. I'm sure by now that most of you watching are aware that this past weekend, the United States military, I believe it was a Delta Force, or Delta Forces, went into the country of Venezuela. Now, I don't know whether you want to call it an invasion, where they invaded them, they entered, whatever you want to call it, but they engaged in a military action in Venezuela for the purpose of arresting the president of that country, Maduro, and taking him and his wife into custody. They did so and transported them to the United States, to New York, if I'm not mistaken, to be held and to be tried and brought to court on the basis of an indictment that was issued out of New York. Before I tell you how this ties in to causing a problem for me to move to Panama, let me give you just a little brief overview of some of the history of that region, and then I'll tie it all together with my concern about moving there right now. Now, I'm not an expert on Latin American foreign relations, so I'm just giving you an overview on things that I know and the little bit that I've looked up. Based on what I understand, and I'm going to refer to my notes, in 2001, Hugo Sanchez was the president of Venezuela. At that time, he took state control and ownership over the oil reserves. Now, he allowed foreign companies, and I think it was maybe Exxon and a few other companies, he allowed them to still stay in the country and do the refining and other work regarding the oil industry there. Well, in 2007, Chavez decided he wanted to take this a little further, and he did a complete restructuring over what was going to be the agreement between Venezuela and the oil companies, the foreign oil companies that were there. And this agreement was very advantageous to Venezuela, giving it a large percent, is my understanding, of ownership and revenues all across the board, and not very, are not nearly as beneficial to foreign oil companies. Now, my understanding is that ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips said, oh, heck no, we're not agreeing with that. So then Chavez basically took over, seized all their assets, and those oil companies left the country. I think Chevron stayed behind. But the point is, in leaving, they also lost billions, and I understand it is billions of dollars in equipment and money that they had put in and poured in to the oil industry infrastructure in Venezuela. Well, I think it was 2020 was when Maduro was indicted. And the indictment included, if I'm not mistaken, charges that he was importing certain illicit products. I'm not going to name them, but I think you know what I'm talking about, that people use here in this country illegally. And they accused him of that. They also accused him of narco-terrorism. Well, that indictment stayed open and no one had really done anything about arresting him. Well, over the preceding months, there's been action going on. Trump had been ordering military action against boats and ships coming out of Venezuela, destroying many of them. And that's a whole controversial thing. I'm not going to get into that. That's not the point of this video. That's a whole thing on its own. But I will say this, and this is as political as I'm going to get. It would appear, I think, to almost anyone who has a brain, that this is not about that product that was brought in, that it's really about the oil that's in Venezuela. And I say that because approximately 20% of all known oil reserves in the world, not just in that country, not just in Latin America, but in the entire world, is apparently or reportedly underground in Venezuela. So you can imagine how many countries have been salivating and just, would love to get their hands on that oil. Well, since these oil companies were expelled from Venezuela, apparently the oil industry over there has gone to hell in a handbasket. And the oil production has dropped dramatically. I mean, just a fraction of what was being produced. I mean, they say in 2016, for instance, the oil production was the lowest it had been in over 20 years. And it's just gone downhill since then. Additionally, I guess a lot of the equipment has decompensated. And so it's going to take probably billions and billions and billions to get it back up. And who knows what's going to happen. But that is the situation. So you ask, well, what does that have to do with me moving to Panama? Well, let me connect the dots there. Colombia and Panama share a border. And people from Colombia pass over to Panama. People from Panama pass into Colombia. Back and forth, back and forth. There's a lot of business and traveling back and forth between those two countries. Well, in Trump's statements after the military action in Venezuela, he also talked about Colombia. Let me address this, move this camera a little bit. And some of what he said was Colombia is very sick. And then he said it was run by a sick man he likes to make, and then he named a substance, and selling it to the United States. He further said he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you. So that has led to a lot of speculation about maybe a military action into Colombia. And then the president of Colombia has made statements, and he's calling on Latin America to unite against Trump. So again, how does this connect to me moving to Panama? Well, Colombia and Panama share a border. Colombia is only 300 miles from Panama City, which is where I plan to move to at least live in part-time part of the year. So you've got the president of the country that's next to where I want to go calling for action against the president of our country. You've got basically an unstable situation in that part of the world, and you've got likely anti-American sentiments starting to bubble and percolate. And I'm going to tell you, it's not only in that area of the world. It's in Canada, it's in Europe. I was talking to someone yesterday as I was working on this story, and they were telling me they have family members who are of Hispanic or Mexican descent. and they went on vacation in Italy. They're Americans, but they went on vacation in Italy. They didn't tell anyone they were American. They told everyone they were from Mexico because there was so much anti-American sentiment in Italy. They were afraid of how they would be treated if people thought they were from America, so they told them they were from Mexico. So I don't think now is perhaps a good time to be considering a move to Central America, especially a country that's right adjoining South America and right next to the country that's next to Venezuela. So I don't know. You know, I'm kind of putting things on hold to see how everything pans out. But I'm getting a little bit nervous. Well, to tell you the truth, I'm getting a lot nervous about this because it would be a significant investment, not just on airfare, but getting all the documents authenticated, plus getting a medical exam in Panama, plus then getting everything translated into Spanish, and then getting that certified, then having it done and having to hire an attorney. So this is it's not a cheap or inexpensive process. And I have a tiny house community I'm looking at building here, and I don't want to take, potentially thousands of dollars from that to put into a pipe dream that, is basically, like I said, flushed down the toilet because of what's happening in Latin America right now. So I'm just kind of taking a step back. That concerns me too, though, taking the step back, because the longer I wait, the more expensive everything gets. But I think it's worth taking the risk of having to pay a little more than losing all of my investment because of the instability, and if things completely just go sideways in Latin America. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think I should still proceed, or do you think it's prudent for me to step back like I'm doing right now? And I'm reaching out to expats in Panama right now, seeing if they're nervous, how they're feeling. Are they noticing any difference in how they're being treated? So, I'll let you know as I find out and keep you updated. Meanwhile, I have some really exciting news about the tiny house that me and my goddaughter are going to build. And I have a start date, that when we're, at least a schedule as to when we're hoping to start building it. So stay tuned for more videos coming up on that. Whew, you know what they say, we make plans and God laughs. So we'll just see what happens. Stay tuned, and I'll keep you posted on what's happening on all of these different fronts. Meanwhile, I love each and every one of you. I pray that your journeys are filled with joy and blessings, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button, would you? It really helps the algorithm. I don't understand it, but it helps it, and it helps them to send out this video. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.